I've always been of a mind that there are no Roy Hobbs out there. There are no natural salespeople.
People like to buy from friends. They like to buy from people they trust, people with integrity. They don't buy from a company.
Logic and data only take you so far. Story is where we really connect. It lets us build and grow those relationships.
This is the Storytelling for Sales podcast, a show about leveraging the power of storytelling to ignite your sales performance and grow your business.
Hello, and welcome back to Storytelling for Sales podcast. I'm your host, Ed Bilat, and thank you for tuning in again. A fascinating sales leader sharing inspiring personal stories and professional perspective on the art of storytelling for sales. Christy Soukhamneut, Senior Vice President, National Sales Performance of Certainty Home Loans, joining us today from Savannah, Georgia. Christy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Absolutely, pleasure to have you. Gregg Jorritsma, Senior Director of Sales and Marketing at OnRamp Solutions, is joining us from Toronto, Canada. Gregg Jorritsma, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation to be part of this. It's a great opportunity. I'm happy to take part.
Fathi, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us today. You're truly the rock star in the high-tech executive community, and I cannot wait to learn about the leadership, storytelling, and of course, the artificial intelligence. But before we do this, I will ask you our traditional question. What business success story inspires you and why?
You know, the one interesting success story, there are many success stories that interest me and inspire me, but the one that I find very fascinating is the story of Fabrice. Why it is, I'll explain why. And for those of you that don't know what happened with Fabrice, Fabrice is a product that right now sells over a couple of $1 billion, part of P&G. And when it was introduced about a decade ago, how it was introduced, and that's really part of the charm and of this story, it was a scientist who was experimenting for P&G with odor-removing type of chemicals. He was a heavy smoker, and one day he came back home and his wife said, "Oh, you finally decided to stop smoking." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And what happened is he was working on that chemical, and that chemical was able to remove the odor of smoke from his sweater and clothes. So that was the starting point for this story of Fabrice. Then what happened, he went back to P&G, his management, and told him about it. And they decided that they're going to launch a product to remove odor. That was phase 0. And now phase 1 of this story is that they decided that they're going to go after, and when P&G does something, they do it very significantly. And they launched it in 2 markets in a big way. They launched it in 2 markets. And the whole premise was, we will remove unwanted odor.
I'd like to share with you a little bit about my grandmother. She was an inspiring woman. And interestingly enough, just 2 years older than I am today, she had an unbelievable event occur. She got a call in the middle of the night, just after she tucked her youngest babies into bed. The phone rang, waking her up from her groggy sleep. And it was somebody on the other end of the phone telling her that her husband had passed away in a plane crash. And that's a call that none of us ever want to get. But particularly if you've been a stay-at-home mom and you're the mother of 7 children, 2 of which are still small little kids. And she, can you imagine?
No, I can't imagine that. So she actually got a call like that. Yeah.
She actually got a call like that. And, luckily my aunt and uncle were passing through. He was an Air Force officer, and, she also a stay-at-home mom. They were on their way to New Mexico, and she was home, while they were moving. And she was there. She said she remembers waking up with her mother coming into her room, not being able to say anything really audible. And she ran back into the other room. The phone was still dangling off the hook and she could hear people speaking. And she picked up the phone and they were telling her that her father had been in a plane crash. And at that point, they didn't know if he was the one who had died or if anybody else on board had died or what had happened. But within the next couple of days, they discovered that it was, in fact, my father and actually all the souls on board that had passed away. And so there was my grandmother left with 7 kids to feed, no way to make an income, and all of her assets frozen by the IRS. She'd never been anything other than a housewife. She had an 11th grade education. And what do? She'd never worked a day in her life other than as a homemaker.
Wow. What do you do? That's the question.
You bootstrap is what you do.
Jim Estill founded EMJ Distribution in Guelph when he was just out of university. He started the business by selling printer supplies out of the trunk of his car.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Built that business up to, probably just shy of $1 billion before one of the big boys, Citrix, acquired the company.
Okay, that's not a bad acquisition.
Yeah, that's not a bad start, right? But I think what really resonates with me about Jim Estill is he's always had this sort of philosophy of being more than just a business guy, but being involved in his community and really giving back. A few years ago, I think it was 2015, he actually reached into his own pocket. Now, it's reported he spent about $1.5 million and brought 50 Syrian refugee families to Canada and set them up in Guelph.
I call my grandmother the accidental feminist. She never wanted to be the president of a company or run large organizations, but that's what she did. She walked in one day having never run a business, and the next day she had to figure out what to do with little, if any, help. And she became the president of the Big Band radio station. She became the president of many of his companies, some of which she sold off, some of which she kept. And one of my favorite stories of her was what happened to my grandfather's seat on the commodity exchange. She actually became the first woman to have a seat on the commodity exchange. The guys who ran the exchange came to her and said, well, sorry, women aren't allowed to have a seat on the commodity exchange. You're going to have to sell it. And at the time, she looked around and she said, no, I think this is a great investment. I really want to hold on to it. And they said, we're sorry, women can't have a seat on the commodity exchange. And she looked back at them and she said, no, you know what? I don't think that's right. I think I'm going to keep and hold on to this. And after many, many weeks and arguments and discussions, they came back and said, you know what? You're right. You can keep it.
How did you even get into the sales?
Actually, completely by accident.
Really? So what happened?
So in about 1988, I had finished college and I had had a summer job the previous couple summers on an order desk for a chemical supply company. I didn't even consider it a sales role, really. I was just answering the phone and taking orders for various electroplating chemicals, most of which I had no idea what they were or what they would be used for.
So that's not even a farmer in the sales world. No, so it's definitely not a hunter, but not a farmer either, right?
No, not at all. So once the summer ended, I had recently become engaged to my now wife of 29 years. We were young and stupid, and we decided to quit our jobs and just move out of Toronto to Waterloo. No jobs, no prospect, nothing.
Why would you do that?
Well, it was the start of what was going to be our marriage and our life together. And looking back, there's a saying that goes, it's not youth that is wasted on the young, it's fearlessness.
Right? Oh, that's interesting. I can resonate with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I did not intend to get into the business. I was really happy in what I was doing. I was a data engineer in a big organization, and I was extremely happy. But what I found, I was not challenged. I just was not challenged enough. Although I really enjoyed what I was doing, I felt that I was not challenged enough. And my first daughter was just born. And a week later, I left on a 3-month contract with my ex-professor who had a consulting company. And I was basically the first employee. It was my first company, and I never looked back. So I was not really looking to be in the business world. I just kind of, you can say, fell into it because I was bored.
So it's kind of an interesting story. My father was in the process of building a home. And I was in the process of graduating from college at the time. So he needed a home loan. I needed a job. And the person doing his home loan, there were a couple of scenarios that happened, changes that occurred, and they weren't able to do his loan as they promised. And so he decided that he would open a mortgage company and I should be the president of the mortgage company. So my very first job in the industry was as president of a mortgage company.
Wow. So that's quite a promotion for the very first job, right?
Well, you talk about figuring it out, and believe it or not, that I got that job 5 years, almost to the day that my grandmother passed away. And because my dad opened that company, I was literally sitting in her desk, in her chair at her desk in the building of one of my grandfather's companies, opening that business. So that's how I got into sales.
What's your favorite sales failure?
Well, of course, every sale I've ever been involved with, I closed.
Yeah, I'm sure. From the day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never lost a deal. Of course, there are always different things that come up and things you could have done right or wrong. But I think one of the most significant sales disappointments I've ever had really led to a real epiphany moment with a great manager I had at the time. This was early 90s, and it was the last day of a quarter. And we were driving, we had hit the number, but we were driving for overachievement, right? And I had a deal working and it was going to be there. It was going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I was on the phone to the prospect right up to the deadline, right up to the end of the day, only to have the customer in the end take a last minute bid from one of the companies that I thought had already been eliminated from the process.
Oh, what a surprise, huh?
Yes, apparently they came in with some last minute cheap lowball offer and won, right? And I remember sitting at my desk, and it was maybe about 5:30 by now, and I was really upset. I was really disappointed. My sales manager happened to walk by and said, asked me, he could see I was visibly upset.
Of course. You could feel this, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I had promised I was going to get it, right? So, and he sort of came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, it happens. Did you do everything you could do?" And I said, "Yeah." "And it didn't go your way?" "No." He told me, "You can't beat yourself up about it." This is what has always stuck with me. He said, "We are selling software here. We're not curing cancer. Nobody dies because you didn't close the sale. Now put your head up, go home, be with your family. Your family is more important than any sale would ever be."
I think about it like I think about math problems. I was never one for standardized tests. But you think about those math problems that come up and they say, okay, the train is going to Peoria at 80 miles an hour and another train is going this way at 80 miles an hour. Do you have enough information to make the determination of the answer?
To figure it out, right?
Right. And I always hated those questions because to me in real life, it's never about do you have enough information? Because no matter whether or not you do, you always have to make the answer. You always have to figure it out and figure out how to go forward.
Specifically with technology sales, what are the most common mistakes salespeople make and how to avoid them? Because you've seen this 6 times at least, right?
Yes, the key mistakes that many salespeople make is giving up. You need to have at least 6 to 9 touch points from somebody before they're interested to buy. What many people don't appreciate, people like to buy from friends. They like to buy from people they trust, people with integrity. They don't buy from a company. And anytime that somebody has the opportunity to buy from a friend, they are going to be a lot more attentive, a lot more accepting. And when you look at the glass half full versus a glass half empty, when you're dealing with a friend, is always in any situation, you may not have 100% that you are correct. But if this is a friend working with you, friend, quote unquote, you develop relationship, then they can overlook certain things. That's because you look at the glass half full. But if they are unknown to you, they are just vendor-customer relationship, well, there is no relationship associated with that, and therefore they can look at you at the glass half empty. So what I've done all my life, I feel very strong about creating good relationship with my customers.
Yeah, the mortgage business is a business that I think a lot of people don't choose to go into. I think a lot of people kind of fall into this industry, much like I did. You don't go to college and choose to major in mortgages, you major in finance, or you major in business. And mortgages is something that tends to be secondary for most people. You get into it because you happen to know somebody in the industry, but once you're in, it is such a rewarding and fascinating aspect of the financial services industry. Everybody has to live somewhere. It's one of our basic needs, but it's also one of the foundational pieces to your financial freedom and success long term. If handled correctly, that it really sets you up for your future financial success. And so taken seriously, it is the ability to really help a lot of people find financial freedom and security. So I don't think I would really want to do anything else.
I've always been of a mind that there are no Roy Hobbs out there. There are no natural salespeople. None that I've ever met anyway. I think everyone that is achieving success in sales at some point in their career, hopefully early in their careers, had somebody see something in them and really take the effort to sort of mentor them and coach them. I have had the great benefit of having some wonderful people coach me and mentor me over the years.
We had a system that we were selling into the multinational, and the whole company and everybody was excited because, wow, we have a multinational that is working with us. And they put our system in their demonstration placed in New York City and in Philadelphia. And they will call us once a week, twice a week. I'll get a request because they're multinational, they're across the world. And they asked me to fly there and fly here and everywhere. And everybody was excited and say, wow, we are going to be so rich. And at the end of the day, what happened was they never sold a single system. And they never sold a single system. It cost us so much money to support them, but they never bought anything. It was the promise that it's a multinational and they're going to make us very rich. But at the end of the day, they did not.
Sales is an unnatural act. You're asking for rejection, right? And you make your living day after day being rejected. And so you have to have a perspective and a more holistic view to what's going on in the world, I think, to really make value in the conversations you have with your prospective clients and coworkers.
Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about your true passion, which is artificial intelligence, right? And everybody talks about AI these days, like everywhere. And you mentioned in several of your podcasts and in your TED Talk that AI replaced blue-collar jobs, and now the AI may be replacing the white-collar jobs. So the question is, is that a threat to us, to the salespeople? Will AI replace sales guys?
At the end of the day, we are seeing that AI is going to augment, at least until we reach singularity, where the machine and the human are going to be on the same level. And people are predicting that will be in, let's say, 40 to 50 years from now. But until then, what we are seeing that AI augmented human intelligence is going to be the most likelihood way of working.
You talk about the mortgage business and you just said it beautifully. You're helping people to secure their future, help their financial decisions, and find a place to live, right? So what type of stories actually excite them?
Well, when we sit down with a lot of our customers, I love to work with first-time home buyers. And, a first-time home buyer, when they come in, many of them haven't started saving for retirement. Maybe they're 19 or 20 years old or even 25. And they're buying their first home. Maybe they're a young veteran, or maybe they're still in their first job and they haven't looked at their 401k. They haven't even thought about what it takes to even think about retirement. That's something that is their future self. And being able
too far away, right?
It's too far away. We think about the current. And I read an interesting article just last night that talks about how we make decisions. And if I offer you $100 today versus $150 just 3 months from now. Most people will take the $100 today, even though it's an unbelievable return to get $150 just 3 months from now. Yet, if I offer you $120 a year from now, or $130 13 months from now, everybody's going to take the $130. They can rationalize and understand the difference when both decisions are long term.
Put yourself in the prospect's shoes and think about what story would they like to hear. Most often, it's a story about a similar company, a similar type of business that was, wrestling with a problem because they probably have a similar problem.
Mm-hmm.
How they chose your product, how you built it up, how you deployed it, and what kind of results they're getting. The inherent thing in storytelling is that we're hardwired to both tell and listen to a story. Right from childhood, as a parent, you read stories to your kids, and early on they start with once upon a time, and they typically end with happily ever after.
That's right.
That's what a customer wants to hear.
A salesperson has number of activities. They do research on the company. They call the company. They create the relationship with the company. They do a demo. They provide a proposal. They negotiate, and then they receive the purchase order. So you have multiple tasks that they are doing. In this case, what you're going to see that AI is going to actually take away some of the difficult parts
of the sales cycle.
Part of the sale, but will not remove the interaction with the human, or that relationship will not disappear, which apply the same thing to a doctor, to a nurse, and others. When you have 20 tasks, because everything that we do consists of multiple tasks. It's not a single thing. We talked about it. When it's a single thing, like parking lot attendant, that's a single task, or receptionist, a single task. That is going to be impacted heavily. But when you have 20 tasks or 10 tasks, you won't lose everything. And the same thing will apply to the salespeople. We're going to see elements that are going to be enhanced by the AI, obviously selecting better leads and so on. But the relationship with the customer, they cannot replace that.
What challenges do you see facing many of today's sales leaders in business or specifically in sales?
Well, much like my first business, we're facing so many unknowns right now. Today's sales leaders really need to be bold and brave. They got to take the time to listen to their people and hear what their real fears are. I mean, we've got to truly listen and listen to what is being said. There's so much power in empathy. And it's kind of like, I don't remember what it feels like to drive for the first time. So it's hard for me to sit and tell my daughter what she's going to feel like when she gets behind the wheel for the first time. She's 14 years old, and as she gets ready to turn 15 in a month, I can't tell her what she's going to experience. However, I can sit in the passenger seat and think about what I'm going to feel the first time she gets behind the wheel. And I can have a lot of empathy and come up with those feelings. And as sales leaders, we've got to think about what's going to happen for our people in the environment that we're coming into. The market is changing and shifting, and we've got to put forth our empathy and really listen to our people, because there's some scary things that are happening. In every market, there are people who are going to do well, and we need to encourage our people, but we can't encourage them without first listening to them, practicing empathy, and then really being in their corner.
So in order to move to the next level, every level of a company, and there are many levels. If you look, the first level is just to get the product and to get initial customers. The second level is to get to 1 million. The next level is 5 million. And the next level is 10, and after that is 50. It's interesting, in each stage like that, involve other people and involve more experienced people. And you have to make sure that you have the right number of people and the right skills in each level in order to move to the next level. Sometimes the current people, you need to get them trained in order to be able to move to the next level. And sometimes you have to bring people with different skills that don't exist in the company for the current level. I'm sure that you know that the failure rate of companies in the first 5 years or 3 years of life is very, very high. If you survive 5 years, you have good likelihood to be alive. But even if you look at the Fortune 500, do you know that the life expectancy of a Fortune 500 is only 20 years? I repeat, the life expectancy of a Fortune 500 is 20 years.
The idea that what works for one person, if I give this other person the same thing, they should be successful, isn't the way the world works anymore. People learn differently. People have different behavior practices and different requirements. You need to be flexible and understand that your objective as a sales leader is to give each individual on your team what they need to have an equal opportunity at success. Now, for some, that might be almost a completely hands-off relationship with the person that, they know what they're doing. They just go and they do it.
That's right.
Another person might require, to talk to you periodically and get some coaching. Another, it's all over the board. But if you're not receptive to the idea that you need to support different people on the team in different ways, and you're not willing to go out and actually spend that time with them one-on-one, I think that becomes a real issue in today's world. When you start telling a story, people are preconditioned and hardwired to listen, and they drop their critical thinking barriers. If you think about when you go to a movie today, a ridiculous movie, a sci-fi movie, you suspend your critical thinking to enjoy the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly the power and transformative engagement that can happen when you start telling a story.
We just need that little bit of extra encouragement to go out and achieve more than we ever thought possible.
Mm-hmm.
But when push comes to shove, we know we're really awesome, but sometimes taking that first step can be really hard. And we need somebody in our corner cheering us on. And I get the honor and privilege of oftentimes being that person that gets to be rooting for you and cheering you on to success. Storytelling is just such a powerful way for us to connect to another human being. Logic and data only take you so far. Story is where we really connect. It lets us build and grow those relationships, and relationships are what it's all about.
That does it for this episode of Storytelling for Sales. You'll find show notes and links on our webpage, storytellingsales.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.